welcome to our Life Group Leaders Lounge. My name is Brooks, and I'm joined, as usual, with my awesome co-host,
Raquel.
There we
You
go.
were going to say
Raquel and Braden.
Yes. We're glad you guys are here with us today. And just as a reminder, we're here to equip and inspire you to be the best Christ-centered leader you can be in whatever context you find yourself. And so today, we are talking about large life groups, right? Mm-hmm. So last week, if you didn't listen, in episode 10, we were talking about leading a smaller life group. What are the dynamics of leading a small life group? So if you haven't listened to that one, make sure you go back and check the last one. It was really good. So today we're going to talk about what are some dynamics involved of leading a larger life group. So let's begin with this question. Like, how can we continue to develop authentic connection and authentic community when a life group is larger, when a life group gets bigger? You know, it starts to grow. More people are attracted to it. It starts to grow. Because there are challenges involved with a larger life group, right? I mean, what would you guys say are some of the challenges of being in a larger life group?
I think it can feel impersonal sometimes. If the group is so large, those who tend not to speak anyway will definitely just kind of sink into that and kind of, what's the word? Hide, I guess.
Yeah.
Like true. Those who are like introverted personalities probably find themselves overwhelmed and maybe even becoming more introverted because it's hard to find your place amongst the crowd. And I would say the other challenge too would just be keeping everyone focused. Right. That could be a challenge unless everyone's just really engaged, but it could be a challenge when you have a lot of people and you're trying to keep everyone on the same page, moving along, trying to honor the time commitment you guys had.
Right. Yeah. So it does get a little tricky when groups get bigger. It gets a little more challenging. So what are some practical tips that you guys have seen as life group leaders that maybe speak to this idea of like, what are some practical tips we can share about how to make this a great experience for the people coming?
So I will sometimes on that first meeting, if we are just jam-packed. I remember one time we had 11 or 12 couples, so there was 24 of us in the room. It's a lot of people.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
We dedicated that whole first meeting to an icebreaker, and which you mentioned in previous episodes.
Yeah, we had a different podcast all about icebreakers. So.
Dumb and deep.
Yeah, having icebreakers that are both dumb and deep.
And we asked a dumb and a deep question, and we went around the room so that every person had a chance to speak. More than a chance, it was like a requirement, right? What's your name? You know, and I learned so much about everybody in that one session, and it wasn't a lesson. It was just getting to know people, and I think that is also so valuable.
Yeah. So as a life group leader, you are intentionally providing space for all the people in your group to be heard, right? Because that's still, even if you have a big group, that's still what we desire, is to have everyone have a chance to speak.
Yeah.
And one thing I actually like that you said before the podcast is you were mentioning, you know, being intentional to encourage people to be even outside of the group. Maybe if you do have a larger group, maybe people who are in your group that would want to meet together outside, that could be really beneficial too.
Yes, we definitely make it part of the culture of our group that's normal for us to be meeting outside of the group for whatever reason. You know,
What are some examples of that?
I asked, is anybody free tomorrow? I need to go buy a chicken.
What?
Yeah, no, for real.
All
it was
right.
a very
Just a common example. Just
what's
buy
a
a
relatable
chicken.
example, Raquel? When you need to go buy a chicken, and not like when you need to go
Who
get
wants
chicken
to
from the
come?
grocery store,
Yeah.
but when you need to go buy
a
a
live
chicken.
chicken.
That is awesome.
But
Next time you need to buy a chicken, I'm
it
calling.
definitely disarms people. I needed the help. It was an opportunity to bring somebody along and go in a car ride and get to know them even more. And you know, why not? And it was. People laugh. They're like, okay, you know, and it was great. But it sets the culture for the more obvious, hey, you know, I like to walk on Thursdays. Who wants to come?
Yep.
Well, if they're going to go with Raquel to buy a chicken, I guess this is normal that we meet up during the week to do whatever it is.
To do life together, right? Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Brayden, what about you?
I mean, I would say one of the key things for me and I've had larger groups quite often in my experience of leading groups. And in fact, my current group is depending on the week, 14 to 16-ish people. And it's great. We're having a wonderful dynamic. So I don't say it in a negative way at all. But one of the things I try to do every week is have multiple chances for the group to split into smaller groups.
Right.
And so I facilitate that very intentionally. Part of my planning process is to think, how can I get them to break off to discuss either key things about the content or even just personal things. So I think it just depends too, when you're looking at your lesson plan for that week, to include both.
That's good.
Have times to break into smaller groups for just the dumb reasons, if you want to call it that, like personal reasons to get to know each other, but also content wise, like you can drive the content and still lead it as the leader, but also have chance to discuss in much smaller groups and then bring it back to the large group. There's so many ways you can mold it.
You can do that. You can do a lot of ways. And even for our listeners that maybe have a smaller group, they're hearing this, they're like, well, my group is 4 people.
Yeah.
It's not larger. I think what Brady mentioned is really useful in all contexts because like I know even in some of the groups I've been involved with, even if we had 5-6 people, I would split people in pairs and I would say, instead of an icebreaker today, just have a time to get to know somebody that you don't necessarily know. And so I would just start splitting people off and then it could just be, hey, pray for one another, or it could be, here's a question I want you to process, but it's intentionally providing space for people to connect with one another.
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of what we do here, right? So we want to develop authentic relationships here at Newbreak Church. And so that's something we want to be constantly thinking about, and providing space for that can be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And I think one other thing to do is, if you do have a larger group is, start trying to think about how can you get as many people involved in the discussion as possible. So if you are seeing that some people maybe aren't involved or aren't talking, then maybe you can even invite them to share into those moments. So as a leader, you just want to be cognizant of where your group is at and who's talking and who has just gone super quiet for a moment.
It's almost like learning how to lead by again, moving the content forward, but with questions along the way. Very good, thoughtful, open-ended questions.
Absolutely.
That help continually make it conversational, especially as a large group.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just want to add, are you going to say something, Raquel?
Yeah, I was going to say, if I see somebody who's quiet and but I feel like they will speak if I call on them. I'm not like, what do you have to say? I'll say, hey, I see that you're processing. What are you thinking?
Yeah,
Tell
that's
me.
good.
Like,
that's
share.
Good. Yeah, that's good. That's good. We could do a whole podcast on just those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
I think that would be really helpful. So, lastly, I want us to think about, so one thing when I consider being in a small group is planning for the future. Because if your group continues to grow and grow and grow to the point where it's a wonderful dynamic, but maybe not everyone is being heard, and maybe the size is too big for your place, then what I would encourage you to do and think about is start to raise up someone that could eventually multiply your group, right? Because we are really interested in identifying leadership potential in people and seeing them as apprentice leaders that we could eventually help to launch their own group.
Growing groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always, yeah.
Because if our churches are growing, then groups should need to be growing too. So that the way there's always a place for people to be shepherded. Because this is something that, Brooks, you were saying before this podcast started, but it's not even just about the logistics of do we have enough space in our house or wherever we're meeting, but do we have enough space and almost like in my heart to shepherd these people well.
Right.
So when you're at that capacity, and you might have to discern what that number is for you or whatever. Right. But if you can't shepherd those people well, then maybe it's the Holy Spirit leading you to multiply.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And we'll talk more about raising up apprentice leaders and how to train them and all that coming up in the future. So make sure you stick around for that. But I think this was a great conversation. It was good to process together. I look forward to next week's podcast. But Brady and Raquel, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks, producer Ryan, for producing us. And I hope you guys have a great week.